adjust that thermostat, or is it just me?
No, I sense it.
Oh, sure, Mr. Mel.
Sure. We'll go ahead. We've got
Let me get set up here. Is everybody's mics on?
You want to make some remarks?
No.
Uh,
My lights, I'll change because my light's not on down here. I got numbers.
You got numbers?
Oh,
There's numbers here.
As long as you got numbers.
I got numbers.
Speak loud. Numbers left and top. Huh? You like this?
Morning, Bill.
Morning, sir. How you doing?
That was a great suggestion of yours at the last meeting.
Good to go.
That worked out real
I
well.
hope you got your presentation, great.
All right, we're all on communication.
Yep, you're all on.
They were civil. Something like this. Much more than.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Okay. Ms. Randolph?
Here.
Mr. Shire?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Chairman Boardman?
Here.
Let the record show that Mr. Mao is absent.
Thank you. You received through the emails and so forth the minutes of the regular meeting on the 23rd. Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I reviewed them, I didn't have any issues with it.
Is there a motion to approve them as circulated?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Does anyone want a printed copy?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, any additions, withdrawals, items on the agenda, reshuffling? If none, we'll move forward. We've got to kind of try and plow through here today as efficiently as we can, which I know we've been pretty good at doing. We've really, I think, got three things important to deal with and button up. And that is the issues on the landscaping code remaining from our last meeting. We've got the roof colors and materials discussion, which I don't think is quite as awesome in terms of time as I thought it might be, but we need to proceed on the basis that it is. And then we want to take a quick look at Bill's first cut of some of the issues that would be included in our report, and I'll talk a little more about that when we get to that item on the agenda, at least what I envision, to get your guidance if we're on the right track as far as the report is concerned. So we have no communications from the public. Any announcements from any members or staff?
I'd just like to pass these around. This was a letter that was given to me after the last meeting, and it was written by the resident that spoke, Slominski.
Sure.
He asked that we have these, even though he's not going to make another presentation. He just didn't get his letter in time.
I'll take a packet just in case for the comments at the end.
I thought his remarks were very constructive and appreciated. All right then, let's move on to the remaining issues on the landscape code. And as I recall it, the issues that we had the suggestion from our consultant, and I think that the issues we focused on were a requirement that if you're doing a renovation of landscaping that wasn't part of a permitted building construction project, then if you were replacing more than 25% of your landscaping, the consultant had recommended that require a discrete permit for landscaping. And we talked about the concept of sort of,
The easement or the open sightline?
yeah, sightline, that is, an open sightline in front, and there's an alternative additional requirement, I'm not sure which, you'd have to help us with that, was to, limit changing, or limit coverage in the visible front area to some percentage.
Right.
You wanna talk for a minute about that concept, and I think, we had a quick meeting, so we don't have anything to look at or consider in that regard as a possible provision. Maybe you could flesh that out for us a little more.
Well, my understanding from last meeting is that Mr. Thrasher was concerned about the right-of-way easements and people planting in them, which is why you thought maybe the 25% rule would trigger that, if you were to pull a permit for 25% of landscaping. So then we talked about maintaining an open sightline. I sent an email of how a code works in Palm Beach, which is basically, you maintain 50%.
I'm sorry, did you get that?
Yes,
We have the one on lighting.
I sent that to.
and well, it was just a single sheet of paper.
Correct.
That basically talked about vistas.
Correct, there was a kind
Just
of
a single
handwritten
sheet of
thing,
paper.
I wrote in an email, a handwritten thing about vistas, and then I sent a PDF on the lighting guidelines
Right.
that I've used. So basically, the open easement was, whether it's a 100-foot lot or a 200-foot lot, you maintain a 50% open easement. Nothing in that 50% that's open can be over 30 inches high, including planting, fenced structures. The other 50% you could landscape, to create privacy, to buffer cars and driveways, to buffer, buildings and structures and things like that. So, I thought that was a pretty simple approach to handling your concerns with the front of the house and the right ways.
Well, actually, I am not suggesting that we allow plantings in the right of way at all.
Well-
I've been directed not to plant in the right of way. So the objective that I have in all reviews, if I catch it, and I missed at least one, is that there are no plantings in the right of way at all. That's been a directive by consensus that's been given to me by the commission. This was planting on private property concept. And the question is, in my mind, does and I'll call it a view vista or vista view, whatever, a view angle, a view from the roadway on the front exposure. The question is whether or not 50% of this unplanted low hedge is sufficient, enough for what you recommend. So, and in my letter, I do have question marks on that percentage. So I think as I read that email, you were suggesting some percentage, and that's why I left those open.
Correct.
It did say in Palm Beach 50%, but
It's just a starting point.
Yeah, for
and-
discussion.
Correct.
Don't we have real problems when we get into that area? Because, number one, the core area is very different. We must be talking about Place du Soleil.
Actually,
The core area, there's a tremendous amount of total screening
yeah,
of houses, but for driveway entrance, Picus hedge is right across the front. And as I thought about it, I guess, let me finish it. I think that first of all, you can't, I don't say you could possibly apply a standard like that to the core area. I mean, it's already 70% violation. And so I hate to see us restrict activities at Place du Soleil in essence, and not in the core. And I guess the other question I have is when you are going to do something like this, you kind of have to ask yourself the question is what is the problem we're trying to correct? And do we have a problem?
Well, the answer is, we have a problem in Place au Soleil. It's quite evident by court action. The language that I used here, to the best of my ability, was referring to two districts, north-south and Place au Soleil. North-south typically are very, very small lots, and unique in its character. Place au Soleil has even it has large right-of-way areas that are maintained by residents. By that, it could be as much as 15 foot from the edge of the road.
Whereas in the core, it's
It
7.
could go so small as 1.5 feet.
Mhm. Okay.
So, I don't know why originally in the code creation that they wanted to maintain these open views. I asked, I don't have an answer. If there is an answer, maybe Marty Miner would be one to ask that question. But when you have 15 foot of grass area, and you, from the roadway, and then you say you can plant, you're planting 15 foot in, and to me, in my mind, it would look strange, different. Whereas the property line being closer to the road, and you want to have that hedge look, aesthetically is different. I don't know why, but in other words, planting must be on private property. You gotta go 15 foot in from the edge of the road to get to private property. Then you start this hedge concept. So
Is the open-
whether that's a material problem or not, I don't know, but I know that this open front concept has to be better defined or eliminated. You agree with me?
Yes and no.
Okay,
I think we've talked about this before.
yeah,
When this code was created, they did, when I say they did, it was consultants that the town had hired, plus the committee that was appointed, similar to this committee in ad hoc. They did what they referred to as windshield surveys all over the whole town. And they evaluated everything that was existing at that time in a particular area. Place au Soleil was one, the core was one, beachfront was another, and they tried to set the code based on the characteristics that were there at that time. And the characteristic of Place au Soleil was to have this openness. And that was the last subdivision developed, other than the 1220, the small one that we just had. That was the last big one. And apparently at that time, the developers wanted, they surely wouldn't have given up that extra land to make these wide vistas on each side of the road if they weren't trying to get that particular open look. Maybe because they felt they wanted to be different at that time. I don't know, I wasn't here then. But it was intentional when the code was drawn that had an open look. And I think where we have our problem is defining what degree of openness. And I think Mr. Scharr at the last meeting had a good suggestion when he compared it to what we do with controlling the amount of glass on a given elevation. maybe you could apply the same thing to openness in the landscaping. If you were just going to say, the openness would be, so that you could see the whole front elevation of the house. Remembering that the required setbacks are a minimum of 15 feet on each side. So if you measured the width of the lot across the front, because those odd-shaped lots that in an end of a cul-de-sac that tapered down to nothing, your openness is not gonna be, you're not gonna have room to have openness unless you open the whole front, which is probably what you would wanna do in those that end up with a little narrow front yard or front opening. It's not much more than room for a driveway, really. But, anyway, that would be something to be determined. How much of the dwelling do you feel you have to see to give an open look? Is it 50%? And if so, what Mr. Schauer suggested was that a picture, like he does for the windows, when you're doing an elevation, and apply the same theory to open yard.
Subsequently, giving it more thought, and I might have mentioned it, there's a difference between what relative to windows, relative to plant material. Plant material grows.
Very true.
And in Florida it grows, but it can grow fast. I think we did a great summation of the beginning. Place du Soleil evidently has this characteristic where I try to think of, what might envision like the traditional lawn before a house. There's a sense of openness that really reveals the front elevation. The difficulty for staff in administering this is that when does one cross that threshold where that sense of openness has been compromised? It's a difficult one to try and codify, but it's kind of like when you see it, you know it.
The difficult part is coming up with percentage.
And I'm possibly, I almost prefer to go in the direction of when you, and it's really difficult for staff and for a town to administer this, when you see it, you know it, versus.
That's a case by case.
Now,
That's not-
And that puts
that-
you in a
that-
real difficult
if a-
situation.
well, for most people in our town, you can work with them.
Yeah.
You can explain to them, and if they usually will take time evaluating. Many times we've had conflicts, I'll say conflicts. And we try to explain why, they go back, they work it, and they change it, and then when it's all over, they come back and thank us for maintaining our position. Plus, but where you have a resident who doesn't have that mindset, and you give them something vague, where when you see it, you know it, you get into this concept of selective enforcement. Well, staff has determined, and this, in my opinion, would not work. You need to say, close it, or open it, or give some control that is, I hate to say it, but mathematical. When you get to the mathematics of things, you know, it's, and I know yes and no sometimes irritates people, but it's either yes or it's either no. Try to work out, you know.
Well, I guess then maybe what could simplify it is, because plant material does grow, rather than just saying it's a percentage. If it were a percentage approach, it could be that it has to be maintained,
Right.
not to exceed that percentage
Exactly.
of coverage.
Yeah, and
But I'll give a black and white situation. Let's say that percentage was 30% or 35%. What if someone decided literally to take it literally and say, I'm gonna do a ficus head or a podocarpus hedge of 35% of my property, just straight up, and then the rest of it's gonna be open. It could be,
No, you're gonna do 15-50, or
well,
but I'm reading the letter of the
Yeah,
company I
and-
just do.
Consistent.
actually, I don't know if you have time, I know our time is running out, but north-south, this applies. So in a difficult location in our town on County Road, we have suggested that concept of 25%. Well, 25% would be, and I tried to define that distance would be the lot line, the front lot line distance. But up here in county, they have you noticed that, Rita, they've installed some porta carpets
Yeah.
with that concept in mind. I don't think it looks bad, but that's, the code said, open front yards, it's maintained out in openness as you drive by, you can see it and so on, but they have planted some 5-6 foot porta carpets. And am I going to go out and measure these distances to see? I can find out the distance of the front lot line very easily from a survey, but am I gonna go out and, you know, give me a drawing, give me a elevation, give me something that looks reasonable? You know, if I can get reasonable in the equation, in a conversation with some kind of rule, I think it would work for us. Would you agree, Rita? I know I'm not supposed to use reasonableness, I understand that.
Well, that's
It is either written or it's not, but
typically how it works. and it's-
26% versus 25% on such a concept. I'm not gonna do that.
Kathy?
No, I'm just listening.
Good decision.
What if you measured, if you had a dimension for the front lot line and a percentage had been established,
Right,
and then you put additional restrictions on the size of the material that you could plant in that particular percentage. As you say, it grows, but
Right, you would state that it would be maintained
Maintain
no
to
higher
that
than
percentage.
36 inches maximum height.
see, I don't know if you read what I wrote, but I actually had a percentage in there at one time, and Rita said, in reading the minutes, she said, I don't think they came to a percentage.
I think you had written just a line there or something.
I did, but in this, I put in the percentage, and if
Well,
you
this
read
is a
it,
different- Yeah, this is in a different context.
Huh?
This is the proposal of what we're.
Yeah,
what
it
we-
wasn't
what
your
we will do.
proposal yet.
You were trying to get it
yeah,
over
I was just
Thursday.
trying to get there because I
Yeah.
thought this was the last meeting,
Yeah.
but, you know. But it says open front lawns herein referred to as view vista and applicable to front yards within the north, south, and the Place au Soleil districts. A view vista is the measurement distance of the front property line. Open front lawns, view vista shall be a minimum of 25% of the front property line and without landscape planting exceeding a maximum height of 3 foot. The landscape vista view shall be no more than 75%, or some percentage, 75, 25, 50, 50. But the idea is to define it to the other part, some height restriction maintained at some, and
That sounds very reasonable.
I think that sounds reasonable, so if you have someone doing a new landscaping, let's say it's a designer or a homeowner, and they're presenting a plan, they would show you the equation of how they meet the code. And if someone complained, a neighbor complained, because some neighbor planted the front yard out, you
yes,
would have something to go back to.
that's right.
Yeah.
Or any new planting, and that's exactly what occurred. We had an open front yard one day. The next day, it was covered up with various, you could not even see the front eave line. And nowhere in the code did this person feel that they were,
Did you have complaints from there,
oh, yes.
like a lot?
Most of Place au Soleil, well, no, I can't say that. Some people complain, but then when you start getting into litigation, all of a sudden, no, I can't make that.
So you had litigation?
They
Yeah,
did.
well, but you had litigation over that issue at
Yes.
that house?
Yes,
Is there-
absolutely.
Have there been any other ones? we're gonna do something, I think this is great. But I'm hung up on, going out and asking for comments about what we ought to be talking about. Nobody brought this up. Problem, and then we didn't receive any written comments concerning, I'm concerned that we're losing the openness of Plaza Soleil, and we ought to do something about too many front yard hedges, right? We didn't have any of those.
Other than, did that case end up going to,
Special magistrate.
okay, and was it resolved, and what was the result?
The special magistrate agreed with the town on open front view. Person was required to remove all of the newly planted materials. The special magistrate did not agree with the portion of that special magistrate proceeding that dealt with species of landscape. Because the code was very vague and it talked about other reference materials. So these two things were united or composite in a legal hearing.
So isolating, taking the species component out of it though, the magistrate supported the town's position based on the current, in
Yeah,
terms of
but-
that vista sensibility.
But,
And granted, it doesn't sound like it was an easy process,
no,
and I guess maybe you're looking for something that could have prevented it from going to that. There's always going to be the risk that an owner may wittingly or unwittingly do something that's not in the ordinances. But what sounds like happened there was, something happened, unfortunately, there was expense and effort that staff and the town had to go through, but in the end, the ordinance stood its test. In terms of the vista sensibility, which is what I sense that we're discussing here, and yeah, it's a pain when it gets challenged, but it was challenged and it happened, and one can still write it more specifically and everything or go farther. The reality is, it sounds like the bones may already be there.
in my opinion, they aren't. And I think we were lucky.
The other comment I would make is if you all want to pass this, do this kind of thing, I think that's fine. I think it definitely ought to be highlighted as we did our decision on front area fencing. That at the architectural review and planning board level, when this is considered, that an overt action be taken to involve the homeowners association, Plaza Soleil, and others, because this, I guess I'm sensitive, but we're doing something, we're restricting their ability over there, not in response to their request, and we're doing it and not making the Corps subject to the same kind of thing. Now, for good and sufficient reason, the Corps is not emphasizing openness.
They're
But
different neighborhoods have different characters.
If you're against this further restriction of individual activities and rights, and you see that there has been a change where neither restrictions in the Corps, neither restrictions in Plaza Soleil, and the APV or the commission, after recommendation of this committee, has nevertheless restricted individual rights in Plaza Soleil.
Well, if you remember, the gentleman that spoke at the last meeting,
Yeah, you're right.
he made a point of appreciating the openness,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
even though there was a fence problem, but he still liked the
Mhm. Yeah.
openness.
And that may be the result.
But
Anyway,
there are a lot of things in the code that are applicable to one design district and do not apply to another. So I wouldn't think that, while maybe some people say, well, we're being treated different than these people in another district. That's always been the case, and in most cases, it has been things that a particular group has wanted that wasn't applicable to another district,
Right.
which is just what you said. In the core, that openness wouldn't fly. But,
Well, You know, another point here is that if it were better defined, we might have avoided the extensive cost associated with the special. This was not an easy, simple 15-minute review before the special magistrate. It was expensive. And I think it could happen again, that's all I'm saying.
now with the material that Mr. Williams brought with regard to species, that should help address, and the changes that Mr. Minor suggested in his memos,
Yeah.
that should help plug up that hole.
Yeah, that's covered, I think. Because Mr. Williams' concern was this 25% rule of triggering a trigger.
Yeah,
You said you don't understand that, so if you notice, I eliminated that language, and I added the South Florida Water Management,
Yes.
wise or whatever, as a reference material. So I think that helps, that gets us where we want.
We-
But this other is not
We gotta bring
resolved
this
in
to a
my
head.
mind.
We gotta bring this to a head, if we're gonna spend all the meeting on one item, we've got much more to do. So, what's our pleasure here, that on the concept of,
Sounds like you need to figure out what the percentage is that you want.
I suggest that we have no more than 25% plantings blocking the vista view.
So
Any
75%.
material height. That's what I think makes sense for that district.
And that is based on like a windshield survey?
Yeah, well, based on, no.
No, you know the town much more than
No.
every street by street, more than I do.
Oh, because right now, I'm saying it should be open, period, 100%. That's what the code says, in my opinion. So then you get these height, and what do you, if you see my eave height, if you see my front door, you know,
Okay.
forget that. 25% gives them some planning, some screening, material height, and the rest remains open.
Maybe it's a 25%. It should be consistent. So you don't want like spotted planting in front of the house, you know what I'm saying? It should be a wide open, consistent view. So you're saying 75% of the view would be open to the house,
Yeah.
so.
Or it should be 100%. I mean, but that would mean no plantings higher than. So,
I wouldn't wanna take, sometimes there's, a planting can be used in a way that it accents even an open
Absolutely.
vista, and that's why I wouldn't wanna, I think, a
Absolutely.
more broad approach, and I think the 25%, and feels like a good number, and, you know, we're aware that it might go 26, it might go 23, that's just the nature of it. And
it's the concept.
it's just that's where maybe we're getting with a number, where there's that sense of, when we know it, we see it, 25%.
Yeah,
It's actually not that, you have a 100-foot lot line and you have, you know, it's just done with feet and inches, I don't think it's that difficult.
no, I don't either. That's why I bring in the lot line concept. Measurement.
except when you got these little bitty front entrances.
No. Front yard is front yard. And that's how we ruled on,
I know,
So when you say front yard, if let's say it's a pie-shaped lot and the front is 20 feet and it pies out, and at the front setback, let's say,
yeah,
it's 70 feet, 70, take the 20, 70, you could average it out, or you take the 70?
no. You can have a 5-sided lot, pie shape. And when you have a pie shape, this type of 5-sided lot, there is one front, 2 sides, and 2 rears. And so that front, which may only be 35, 45 foot in a cul-de-sac, it's still, that's the front lot line.
You
So
have to create that sense of visibility.
that's correct.
Okay, I got it.
In whatever the front lot line is, I mean, you can venture this thing out, say in a 5-sided lot, then you have the first 50 foot of the 2 sides have to be no more than high.
And then if there's a corner lot condition, it still applies to the front, not to the side yard.
Just
of the corner.
whatever the front yard line is.
So we're saying 75%, maintain at a minimum of 75%.
Ask him to fill in the numbers.
Need trouble here.
In the spirit of
This
moving
may
this.
take you off into somewhere else, but I don't, because I hear what you're saying in terms of the freedom of people to do what they want to do with their property. And so, for me to understand, I don't know all the different areas that well, but it sounds to me as if Paso Soleil is going through growing pains. It's trying to evolve itself into being whatever it wants to be. Whereas here in the core, it's well established. I mean, it's pretty obvious how things are supposed to look. And just even reading some of the emails, you could hear that there are different flavors and people who want something a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, but so, I
Less
hear what you're
restrictive.
saying, is that maybe the home association route for them to really think about what they want, who they want to be. I mean, are most of your litigation, most of your issues are over there compared to,
Oh, no.
no?
We have,
No?
well, right now, but we've had litigation by one individual
Oh, yeah.
in the Berry Island, one individual over there, and they're both connected.
Well, I didn't mean that, I meant, but, right.
What's interesting is when I first heard it, and I respect the concept that you don't want to restrict the community more. But what Bill's saying is right now, one interpretation of this is that it requires 100% open. So we're actually giving greater freedom to the residents
That's
by
right.
saying, we're gonna let you plant some more. What is new is that there's a restriction that's being specifically stated, it says
That's
there
right.
is a restriction though.
Yeah.
And in that regard, I don't have a problem. What I sense might happen, and this happens in many communities, is people come in, they fall enamored of a community, and they don't understand the subtle little differences. They drive around the corner area
That's
and they go,
right.
oh my gosh, Gulfstream's wonderful, look at all these hedges, oh, there's this nice part over here, I'm gonna buy a house over there, and they don't realize, and it's buyer beware, that all these ordinances apply to you when you buy that property. And someone says,
Specific to,
specific to it, and someone said, calls up their landscape company and says, I wanna make it like, I saw this house over there, and they're not aware of it.
okay.
And that's just a risk. But in terms of being able to help you and help the town possibly, now that I get a little broader picture of it, I have no problem, if we needed to push it forward, to put a motion to say yes, to accept the wording of the 25% or the 75% open, I like it in a positive way rather than a
Yeah,
negative way.
maybe as opposed to shall.
That's actually the way
Yeah.
it's worded.
Yeah, and that's what I realized when Keith was writing in the numbers, that the 75 is the key number, it's not the 25. It's positive. I like furthermore, and it does include the notion of the plant material up to 3 feet, or the 3 feet is allowed.
Maintain.
And it's maintained
Sure.
in that matter.
I have
I-
exceeding mature height, shall not exceed maturing height of 3 foot.
Right.
And get that from the plant list.
Okay, so we have what we need for the minutes and the recommendation as far as the.
I,
If it passes.
there's been huge amounts of discussions, very few motions, so if you,
I'm trying to make
That's
a,
what I'm
I'm trying to make a
trying
motion.
no,
Anyway, go ahead, Keith.
Make a motion to approve open front lawn view vistas shall be a minimum of 75% of the front property line without landscape planting exceeding a mature height of 36 inches.
I'll second it with possibly the caveat that this is something that the APRB should review before it gets passed, didn't you want it that?
no, this
That's
is
where
all-
it goes, that's where the
Oh,
recommendation
okay.
goes.
Very
he's
good.
saying-
But when, in the case of fences, and if this passes, I really think in the case of this as well, at the time they are considering whether or not to pass it, that homeowners association be brought in for their opinion, be affirmatively asked for their
Okay,
opinion.
so that, I would second the motion
Yeah.
with that caveat.
Good. That's good,
Okay.
good stuff.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
I think, picking up on what Patsy said, that we have got to begin to get more input from the people over there perceived as being different. And I think we need to recognize that.
That's good. On ARPV reviews, we get their, I mean, on level 2 and 3, we always get their review, and they have a representative on the, either the ARPV or the commission, so we try to gather their input on that. So this is just code changes, we're doing the same thing, basically.
Are we ready for a
All
vote
those
on
in
this?
favor, I don't know how I wanna vote.
I heard a motion, now it's
I'd like you to tell me I don't vote unless it's a tie. Is that the way it works?
No, it doesn't work that way. You gotta commit.
I'm gonna vote for it, but I really think that, we're passing something that maybe there hasn't been a demonstrated need, from the people involved. I think we've heard a demonstrated need from town manager, and in that spirit, I'm gonna vote for it. I think we've got to be very careful with self-generated restrictions.
But I think the protection is there by, at the next level,
Yeah.
of the
Exactly.
association, so you cut that's protected.
Exactly. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now, does that then put us in a position of saying that we are recommending the Marty Minor's suggestions and adding this one? I think this group was of a consensus last time that we did not want to require a permit for landscape-only changes. I have had second thoughts myself on that, but is that where we are? On that recommendation of his, we concluded that we didn't think, if you were replacing 25% or more of your total landscape, that you should have to get a landscape permit.
That's how I felt, you didn't need to get a permit, but, I'm a gardener and landscaper, so it's like.
Everybody understand?
Let me just go to the root of a landscape permit. Usually when I'm getting a building permit, it's to protect life safety. That's the bottom line. Right. There may be aesthetic things that come in. And a landscape permit is it thought of in that regards to how the state sort of regulates it, to make sure somebody's not planting something that could hurt the health, safety, and welfare of the community.
Well, it's usually to make sure that they're abiding by the code and the rules and regulations, whether it's view easements, species, or things like that. And that if they do require a permit, someone is going out there and inspecting the work of the landscape contractor, because the homeowner may not be that knowledgeable of what is actually going on. And because the town usually.
And do other communities have a requirement to pull a landscape permit when somebody,
Some others do, yeah.
Delray does,
somebody does?
and irrigation.
The irrigation I can see, because that's
Yes.
a life safety issue.
And that's a building that, there's electric and plumbing involved in that.
I'm just gonna go, if you don't mind, the commensurate communities like this, does Palm Beach require it
No,
for
they don't require landscape.
just the town of Jupiter Island?
I don't believe they do.
Wow, okay, because they're really controlling when you go up front.
Well, you're required to present and everything you do in Palm Beach, but I do not think you're required to have a permit. I'll double check that, but
See, I can't get a presentation without a permit.
Yeah, see, that may be a
That's
key
where I am
distinction
having
here.
severe problems.
Yeah, key distinction
Big,
here. Yeah.
and we're small, so you create things that help with the inability to have big organizational concepts.
well, that's why 25% is, if you're gonna say it, an equation's difficult, that equation's difficult. You know,
Now, have you thought of another equation? I mean, I think you were generally just no,
I was generally just.
but in a creative's viewpoint, but in a creative viewpoint, but considering the fact that uniqueness of Gulfstream, would there be a method to trigger such a permit?
Well, you mentioned irrigation, so irrigation contractors are required to pull a permit, I assume.
Well,
If we know it.
if we know it.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, that would be landscaping too.
And sometimes, frankly, all related to this other special magistrate, we get information, irrigation going on over there, you know, hell, I don't know that.
It's just so difficult.
I think that, I've rethought my feeling on the concept. I think the concept is valid, we need a percentage, I think 25 is way too low. Like, you know, we did exactly this 3 years ago. We replaced the entire landscape of our house.
It's
Didn't have to-
material,
Didn't have to do a thing and could have made a huge difference of
absolutely.
a negative nature. Nobody said it was negative, but we think it.
Well, I would
You know,
know
I-
better than to give you a hard time, Bill.
Yeah.
No, I'm not, I don't shy away from anybody.
So,
Well, I agree, if you're gonna do it, it's gotta be more than 25%.
Yeah.
50, I would think 50 would be minimum.
It's a pretty major landscape renovation, depending on the size of the lot, of course.
yeah, I'm almost tempted to either go 49 or 51, one implying that you get less than half, one implying that you're more than.
Yeah, that's, I feel the same way.
I mean, literally that little number kind of sends a message.
What, 51?
If you.
Of what, though? Now, we did get criticism, 25% or 50%, 51%, of what? Is it that, this, is it that? I
I'd say
think you have to
sur-
be specific, more
Well,
specific,
because you could go value, you could go surface area, you could do volume.
yeah,
I don't think it's gonna be value.
Yeah.
no.
I think it would have to be.
Yeah, what you
Palm
pay for
tree.
those palm trees for crying out loud.
I mean, if somebody had one specimen tree that was this magnificent tree,
One tree.
that could be the equivalent surface-wise from the air of, 50% of their property.
Right. It'd probably have to be, I would say, square footage. Surface. But who's gonna give you that?
That's hard to calculate.
Yeah. Like, it's easy if you have, an architect doing it, it's easy to calculate, but if,
A landscape contractor is coming in.
so,
I mean, I have that in other communities where I do review work where they're not required to have a landscape architect, but they are required to have drawings, and some of the landscape companies have great
Well,
draftsmen.
that's where this is gonna have an effect.
Is the guy who's doing the install.
Yeah, right.
That this will possibly put a burden onto the owner financially to prove that they're
They're
either
gonna,
below or above.
you know, and they're gonna have to have a plan of some kind now,
What if we concentrated just on the front yard?
Well, I think that's fine.
yeah.
Because
I mean, that's not totally
what's
bulletproof,
visible
but-
from the front yard.
Yeah, from the street, that concept.
What about the guy who looks at the backyard of somebody, two backyards
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah,
Well, the code basically started off with the concept of trying to control the view of the mass of the building from the roadway. Is that right, Rita? And that's how we got into this bad situation with basements, because it's not viewable, so, up here. But if maybe we had a trigger for just the front yard requiring a street view.
there is in his suggested language, there is somewhat of an answer to this. Not a terribly precise one, but it's 25% who plans to revise or replace more than 25% of the existing vegetation. Now, do you count it by where it enters the ground, or is it the square footage of the canopy, or is it, but at least,
Bushes.
at least the guy can stack up all the old stuff and say, this is it, or identify what he's gonna take out.
I mean, if, say somebody doesn't want to get an architect, and just take the picture of the front
Right.
view,
Right.
and a sketch, I mean, we've worked with sketches, which we can do. At least it gives a due process, it acknowledges due process, and we try to do our due diligence. And it has worked with reasonable people.
I move that it be 50% of the existing vegetation in the area seen from the street.
That's
I'll second it. If the chair's allowed to make a motion, I'll second. If not, I will take over the motion.
Thank you very much. I was gonna say,
Let's do that.
give me an anchor to windward, will you? Okay, so now, I'm reading from Marty's suggestions, all right? The first one is that landscaping, the suggestion that landscaping issues be addressed at the district has been changed to a requirement that the, for irrigation, that it's a requirement that they be addressed at the district level. Okay?
That's kind of a given,
Yeah.
that
that's what I
district
thought.
level.
And the requirement for irrigation has been added. Okay?
A permit for installation.
You're right. The next thing he suggests is adding, jiggering around the list of what's prohibited and what's discouraged, and I think you said that was all pretty good stuff.
It's all good stuff, and I
Yeah.
think we gave backup information with that, this
Okay.
manager.
And then the next one was the one we just dealt with about openness. And we have your suggestion on that. And then he made the suggestion on the window restrictions that we exist today, being visible from the street, should also include over the waterway.
That's
I think we
really,
like that.
that was something I had to ask him to work on separate from. the
Yeah, it
landscaping. He just tacked it
fit
on
in with
my
the
report.
landscape
Doesn't fit in with the
recommendation.
landscape.
It's a different thing.
Different thing altogether.
Okay, but do we don't need to express an opinion on it?
No.
Okay, so that, and then add, no, I guess we haven't added anything.
Actually, I'm wondering if you could incorporate this lighting permit. Right now,
We're gonna use the rest of our time if we get into lighting, I don't know how to handle this.
well,
We have got.
when you say the 50% viewable road triggers a landscape permit, an irrigation permit, and a landscape lighting permit. If I can get them into a separate lighting permit, I can use our existing code and apply it to these types of fixtures they're wanting to install. It's that right now, people have bypassed the lighting requirement because it's part of a bigger Delray Beach building permit, which is just one. So we see a structure, for example, on a building plan, it gets approved and they install the lights. There's no way to evaluate whether the wattage of those lights are overpowering or prohibited by code.
Because they're not required at this code to have a separate lighting permit.
Yeah. So that would, 50% rule would apply both to level 2, level 3, and individual level 1s. So it makes sense to me. That this 50% rule that you just incorporated in the landscape triggers a landscape permit, a irrigation permit, and a landscape lighting permit.
Landscape lighting, for
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that agreeable?
That's
Seems
fine.
to make sense.
That's fine.
Good.
Okay, so,
Oh, I'm ready to quit.
okay, so Marty's suggestions are the keystone for this as
Yeah.
we have articulated changes, and you are satisfied that you have.
Yes.
And would you make your motion again, just to include it?
The motion is to take the writing as written by Marty Minor, including landscaping, landscape lighting, and there was one other item.
Irrigation.
Irrigation, thank you, as well,
But 50%.
and then 50%.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, fantastic. Now we get into, now here we are,
Aye.
400 meetings later, 3 months and we get to the issue that brought all this up.
Yes, indeed.
And it isn't gonna, you know, I hope everybody had a chance to read the sections on roofing. I don't think it's gonna be as hard as we thought. At least I don't. And we have two issues, color and material.
This is for each
And we
section.
have
Yes.
two, right, we have two areas. We have two types of architecture. We have Gulfstream Bermuda, and we have,
Mediterranean,
we have
and then other areas.
Spanish Mediterranean.
What page are we on?
We're on page bottom at 70:81. And, the property survey there that Rita mentioned was mentioned on that page. So, we have not received any comments concerning the Mediterranean style. Well, I guess that's not exactly right.
What did you receive?
I think we had a request for wood and metal.
No, that was, I
Not
think,
metal.
Gulfstream Bermuda over.
Yeah, that's the Bermuda.
West-
But we had a wood and some other style on the Mediterranean as well. Right now, the Mediterranean is saying that preferred are the barrel, traditional red barrel tiles.
The real deal.
Sorry?
I said the real deal.
Yeah, the real deal. Interestingly enough, just parenthetically, that there is not a requirement that they be clay tiles, which in this period is not very good.
Oh.
Because,
Really?
yeah,
It just describes shape, it doesn't describe material.
yeah, and appearance, I mean, you know, and
Oh,
we're not dealing with those. Huh?
I have my suspicions why I'm here at this point.
You're here for one reason, and one reason only.
Your face is getting.
You grossly exceeded your charter. We just wanna know what you
I have a
think.
client who keeps asking, have you gotten to that yet? And I said, you wouldn't get to it, but it's supposed to go to town council.
The issue is color, and
It's
the
a dump.
issue is metal roofs.
Oh, now it is, okay.
Somewhere we have a request for wood roofs too. I'll have to find it.
Shakes.
For like a shake.
Shake, yeah, shake. So, in the Gulfstream Mediterranean area, the barrel tiles are in the book. When it comes to Gulfstream Bermuda, the current section reads, required, flat, white, through and through, smooth, uncoated tile, and gray slate tile may be permitted on homes that are predominantly Georgian or British colonial with Bermuda influences. Flat, gray, through and through, uncoated tile or slate-like tile may be permitted at the discretion of the Architectural Review and Planning Board and Town Commission through Level 3 review process. Subject to Architectural Review and Planning Board, the Town Commission may determine if such alternatives are appropriate for the neighborhood. Scott Morgan submitted a comment when he was the chair of the Architectural Planning Review Board, Architectural Review and Planning Board, that the language I just read after the term slate-like tile should have inserted or other dark colored tile So he has suggested that in the Gulfstream Bermuda section or other dark colored tile be inserted in the discretionary, in the section that upon proper review and approval can be installed. He has suggested that that metal roofs be added to the prohibited list in that same section. And I think he also suggested that it be added to the section on the Mediterranean as well, the prohibited, yes, he did, prohibited section in the Mediterranean as well. Metal roofs to be prohibited. Those two requests on his part basically, I think it's fair to say, incorporate all the other comments we have had on roofs. One fellow who did want the ability to have a hard surface, shiny white tile. He was upset that his request for that had been denied, which seemed to me was very consistent with what's in here today. We've got to find it. Somebody wanted to be able to use wood shakes.
Wasn't that,
On the beach
Preston.
front, yeah.
yeah, he has presently a Georgian Gulfstream Bermuda style home. Wanted to suggest the use of metal roof and shake roof on,
Mr. Shire, that's the house next to the one that you just did.
yes.
Oh, there's another design that came in that somebody wanted to use a different material or wanted to re-roof a house.
Yeah, they haven't come in for it yet, but I'm wondering, since they've made that comment, maybe they're going to.
What's wrong with cedar shake roof?
I mean,
Huh?
What's wrong with cedar shake roof? Just asking.
On a Gulfstream Bermuda style home? I'm not an architect, but that's
Well,
contrary to everything I've ever seen.
well,
on a British colonial.
right, because it goes out to say on a British Colonial, and what jumps to my mind immediately is the whole community of Windsor, which is up in Vero Beach, which almost requires cedar shake roofs, and it's absolutely eloquent. It's a maintenance issue, but it is gorgeous.
On a
On a British Colonial,
British colonial.
which is Gulfstream Bermuda style architecture for each of the majority of houses in the town that exhibit a combination of Bermuda, British Colonial, or Georgian characteristics. And it's
you think that that's beautiful up there?
gorgeous.
So why don't we add that language specific to
well-
that style?
Why don't we add it
It's already
Well,
divided that
under-
way, isn't it?
under
Well-
discouraged? That way,
Has to be approved,
Has to be
Yeah.
approved,
so I'm gonna suggest.
okay?
I would even, I hate to say it, but metal roofs, not that I'm a fan, but I've seen them on British colonial.
British Colonial as well.
Is that right?
Yes, and not as often in that
What
community.
style? I mean, what is
It's
it
not-
a
it's
flap,
typically-
is it a tile?
No, it's like a standing seam type one,
Right.
or a V-crimp, preferably maybe, it could be standing seam or a V-crimp. And then it becomes an issue of your colors cover what colors it could or couldn't be. The one that makes the most sense to me is the one that almost looks like raw aluminum. You know, it's a very primitive, it's a very much of the history of how things were built.
They started off better.
I was ready, when I said I wanted to quit, I wanted to quit.
And we'll stop it right now. We'll stay focused on the metal roofs, because there's another issue in here that I'll bring to the table after that. Does Gulfstream currently allow metal roofs? I don't think it
No.
does. Right.
No.
Totally
So in
correct.
that regard, it's not that one can't do British Colonial without doing metal. It would just open more freedom to give people the opportunity to do metal. I have a feeling that there might be a perception within the community that a metal roof looks like a,
Key West
Barn
house.
roof.
I don't wanna say Key West.
The perception in the community is gonna be that it is an economic decision.
Okay, the irony there being that a metal roof is almost the same
I
cost
understand that, but
as a cement tile roof.
I think if you stop 10 people and say, is a metal roof, they think of barn roofs back home that are coming, you know, that,
It comes from it comes from more industrial
And it's-
or agrarian use.
and it's
Longevity.
somebody who, they know, well, they just don't wanna pay to have a tile roof, so they're gonna put that on. What concerns me, not being an architect, obviously, is there's some very formal looking houses in the core. And I just, a metal roof just doesn't seem architecturally, you're gonna be dealing with retrofits, is what I'm saying. Okay? And someone's gonna have a tile roof that's worn out.
If currently the code is not allowing it, I'd say there's no need to add that to it. Currently our wood shakes prohibited. They are, wow, because that one is just, that's a real missing opportunity.
Well, then I think we should get it.
Then
I
we
mean, you
should
guys
make a
are here for a
recommendation
reason.
that be looked at, but that be
Just
put in the
specifically
code
to
as
British.
discouraged, so that each one would be reviewed by a board, on its own
Right.
merits then for the style of housing. not
Could we go so far as, it could be discouraged? I would make it that it's specifically, I don't think it would fit a Gulfstream Bermuda.
Yeah.
I don't think it would fit a Georgian, maybe.
Well, you know, this is divided in two parts.
Yeah, that's what I
The
thought.
section is
Separate.
divided into two architectural parts.
Well, maybe we need to
Um,
separate Gulfstream
look
a
at,
little more.
7238, on page 7093. Where it talks about, the first thing is predominantly, it says, on homes that are predominantly Georgian or British colonial with Bermuda influences. That's where you're allowed to consider gray slate. So with these alternatives, like your shakes, would they be gray slate and cedar shakes may be permitted on homes that are predominantly Georgian or British colonial with Bermuda influences? And then you see all that requires
To level
actually
3.
clear up through level 3. So it can be looked at in conjunction with the architecture of the house.
I think it gives a great opportunity to, it just opens up something that I believe will be consistent and contribute to the community of Gulfstream. And you've got the protection of the level 3 review in there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you don't have to say discouraged.
Right,
They don't really want to.
right, because, and the discourages, I would like to remove the opportunity, and it removes the opportunity for discouraged, because you only get 3 discouraged and then you're out.
You learned that lesson real good, didn't
That's discouraging. I've been down this road, I've been down this road. And to which then I will bring up the one with.
Oh, can I stop
Sure.
you for just a second while we're
Sure.
on that issue? We gotta reconcile an ambiguity here. Because in the prohibited, following the section I just read,
Yeah,
it says shingles.
Yeah.
Shingles other than
Take that out.
cedars.
well.
Well, you don't want
no,
composition.
no,
Except.
It says, it very generically says shingles. I don't know what that's.
Asphalt
Oh,
shingles.
oh.
Asphalt shingles,
Yeah.
cedar shingles, I don't know what's meant by that.
I would put, other than those cedar shingles referred to in A.
Yeah. You gotta do that.
Yeah. Okay, you see, this is housekeeping.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You're to say what positively you would like it to say, and then we let the attorneys worry about the
Oh.
verbiage.
Your shingles are prohibited unless it's like described in 7238A.
Rita, I think to assume the attorneys are gonna pick up on something is a bad approach.
You don't think they'd catch that?
Well, let's
I don't
put it in our,
trust
let's put it in our,
I would
Right.
prefer to make an error on the side of obvious.
let's put it in there so that.
I should have said that. I didn't,
It doesn't say the shingles thing's been changed at all, other than to take out of the prohibition and things we just approved. Okay? Now, what about the issue of metal roofs? Or what's your pleasure on that?
As much as I, as an architect, would love to have them as an opportunity, I respect that the community has a history of not having them. And I sense that there might be a consensus that it may be something that is too big of a bridge to go over at this time. You know, I think there's enough opportunity still available without having to add it to the mix.
So you're saying keep it on the prohibited list.
Keep it on the prohibited list. That it's, and having done work in many other communities where it's a sensitive line, especially when you've got a lot of re-roofs that it can open up the door to, where it gets gray. Is it fitting the architectural style? Isn't it fitting the architectural style? It can cause, it can affect the appearance of the community. I'm not gonna say positive or negative, but it can definitely affect the appearance.
Okay.
And just because it's already on the books the way it is, I think we're really opening ourselves up to a lot of exposure by saying, okay, that one, the cedar shakes because there's the level 3 review and everything. I think you're fine. I think opening the metal roofs, you might start getting the possibility of re-roofs and stuff in there allowing it.
Well, it is not dealt with today.
Yeah, let's see,
It is not prohibited.
Oh, it's not?
what's not prohibited?
Well, I mean, it's not in the general provision describing what's proper.
Metal roofs.
Metal roofs?
Metal roofs is not in the prohibited section.
I don't know. I don't know that for a fact.
That's what Scott's asking us to do, is add it to the prohibited list.
I don't see it on.
It is
But
not-
he is,
No, here it is, it's in page 7047. It's in another section.
he's adding it for clarity.
Metal roofs except unpainted copper when used as a decorative accent or minor accessory structure are prohibited in that section of the code. On 7047.
Yeah, that's in the general section.
Right.
So you could use copper.
Only as an accent.
Yeah.
So
And
it's,
then, see, in the
gutters,
Bermuda
thinning,
section-
weathering.
I still think,
You could also like do a peak as an accent piece, I've done that.
this must be one of those, this is actually the first one I've ever seen in here, the allegation that the thing is ambiguous. Because I think it's very well done and detailed. But maybe if that is our opinion, that they should not be allowed, and it's listed as prohibited in the reference on page 7047. I think for clarity, it should also be listed in these individual listings.
There's a good deal of this in 7047 that should
Right.
be listed, because this is a stump, I just know, look, you know, our responsibility as professionals is we gotta get to know the codes, but I remember when initially getting familiar with culture, this flip-flopping literally the pages at first was like, oh, it's there, but it's not there, until I found out that all of them really, really apply.
But I think that ought to be a general comment to the lawyers drafting this, to reconcile
7047.
7040 page, section 7099 with 7218 and the other one.
Yeah, 7238.
Well, Bill, didn't,
Cause like there's wood shingles up there, it's prohibited.
Bill,
Yes, ma'am?
didn't, in somewhere in the code, but I'm not sure where just now, at least what we've always followed is that everything has to follow the general sections. But then if you have one of the specific styles, either the Bermuda or the Spanish Mediterranean, that you also have to comply with that, and the most restrictive wins.
That's a general, maybe written letter but at least verbal direction from Mr. Randolph as court, case history, that the most restrictive section of the code prevails.
So the specific rules over the general.
And the
That's
spe-
the general constructive part to interpreting. But here's a case where they ought to look at the two and make them as close to.
No, I think that's good wisdom, but I don't know if you wrote that down, but you use sections 70-218 and 7238, but then you went to page 7047, so I think you're talking section 7099. Subsection 3.
Section 770, section 7099.
Subsection 3,
Yes.
Yes.
okay.
Should, well, actually subsections 1 and 2 should as well be reconciled with the comparable sections in these two specific matters.
Well, I don't know, where is an example that the preferred or discouraged conflicts with,
Well, right here,
okay?
if I wanted to put a metal roof up, and you give me this general discussion here, that, you know, you don't allow metal roofs, I mean, what I would argue at least is, well, obviously, that's not the case when you come to the detailed description of Bermuda, because it's not included.
This is exactly what I came across. In the prohibited 7047 is primary color tiles. And I had a client who we were doing a Georgian style home, which the primary color does not allow, because the red was not allowed because it was primary, but we proceeded to show 5 or 6 homes to the APRB that were in Florida, Georgian style homes that had red roofs on them, some of them very significant homes. And the members all just said, our hands are tied, we can't approve it because here it says, because of this part here.
It's 2 sections, I think, but it wasn't shown in the 70-238, and this section prohibited the red primary color.
Right, well, I thought, maybe incorrectly, that we had shown that in the latter section, we had shown that it was intrinsic to the architecture, that it was an example of the architectural style.
I think you did that, you definitely did.
Right, and then it was, for some reason, and what I thought was earlier in this process of our meetings was, we were going through a waiver process, and I thought maybe by that waiver process, we might have
gonna throw that out there
we
too.
might have
because
got the opening that we could have gotten it through.
The waiver, yeah, and I think you could.
Very possible.
Because they actually wanted, in my opinion.
I got a sense of them, they would have liked to have given
wanted
it to
to
the
have
client.
it approved, but they could not. Their interpretation of the code. And it was a unanimous decision. unfortunately.
Right, no, and
And
we won't go down
Okay.
the roofs then.
So, is your issue been dealt with?
It's been dealt with, but it's a,
I mean, do we need to do something?
let me put it
Right,
right,
if they wanna spend more money on another roof.
it's really simple. I can itch my ear this way, or I can itch my ear this way. To get a red roof on a Georgian style house, I gotta go like this. And that's really what it comes down to. And the provision was there, and I was very happy when I realized that waiver process was gonna be available, and I was like, I'm happy, but if I'm a new professional, let's say 15 years from now, coming to the town of Gulfstream, boy, does it take me a while to figure out that's the
Yeah, that's
path.
true.
But you know what, that's part of sometimes what just comes with experience and maturity and doing something. You know, not everything is green light, crystal clear the first time.
That's
So
very
we-
true.
Are you,
I'm comfortable with the way it is. I will say that not under this section of, today we were supposed to discuss roof colors, there is something prohibited in the code that I believe Gulfstream would benefit from, which is the introduction of gambrel roofs. Gambrels being like a barn-like structure, a Dutch style, and it's just prohibited. I sense why it's prohibited, because when it's done poorly, it's horrendous. I think it's an architectural style that's more difficult to achieve success with. And maybe just as a protection against that, that's why it's in here. But I had an instance once where I came in and a client adamantly wanted, I told my client, I circled it, sent it to them, this is prohibited. We still designed an entire house, brought it in, and it was, we never even went to be on staff. The staff said they can't even put it.
No laughing.
And I can tell you that knowing the architectural character of Gulfstream, it's a style that I think Gulfstream would absolutely, once they see it, would absolutely embrace it.
I remember when they did this code. And that was, somebody brought that up, I don't remember who it was, but immediately, all of the rest of them said, we don't want any barns in town.
Right, sure. All
So,
people from Pennsylvania.
I mean, right now, there's a very prominent, well, not, incredibly well executed gambrel style, well, it's a Hampton-esque shingle style gambrel house on the north end of the island of Palm Beach. And anyone who's been driving up down the road, it took a long time to build. Everyone knew the house. It's, no, there's Merck that's on the water, that's on the Intracoastal side, there's one on the ocean now.
Smith.
Okay. Did you do landscape on it by chance? Okay.
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 Both of them?
And it gets a real strong reaction.
It's beautiful, actually,
It's gorgeous.
because it's not totally consistent with everything, and it just, if it's done well, it looks great. So I agree with that. I mean, it's,
So we are going to continue,
Okay.
the consensus is to continue metal roofs as a prohibited item. Offline request to the lawyers to reconcile these two groups of sections so that
Yeah.
there's, you know,
Good.
something's gotta say notwithstanding, or it's gotta say, you know, this takes precedence over, or doesn't, just to show a person that looks at both sections, or probably looks at one and then finds out about the other one when they come in here.
You know, okay.
So, okay, now, we haven't dealt with colors yet, let's go talk about colors. What about the request, which Scott carried forward, about the dark? It would be the same place where we inserted the shakes. It's in section 7238. Where right now you can have, Lieutenant, I'm not sure, I'm not remembering, did we become distracted and talk about the shakes? Or did we decide to approve or other dark color tiles after the slate-like reference? I don't think we
we
dealt
didn't
with
make a
that.
decision.
I don't think we dealt with that. We did say to put the shakes in there, but what about or other dark colored tiles? That would be in dealing with Georgian or British colonial with Bermuda influences.
When it would say other dark colors, does that include brown?
Black.
Does that include red?
Okay, dark red.
What are you trying to do with both of them?
You know, we've had two homes that have wanted red. And they both, one by application changed the style of their home. It no longer was, so they switched to other
It's like the
variations.
Mediterranean, which
Yeah.
allows a reddish roof.
Which was rather expected. And yours, and so maybe you ought to me, dark is very vague, could be, leads you down the wrong path, could open the doors to somebody who wants to bend the rules, but I think people like the red concept.
but couldn't you rely on your architectural review board to approve that?
This is
Dark,
level 3.
yes,
we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
here.
It's
We're talking level
level-
3.
It's level 3 in the current process is if the waiver was allowed, one could do it as a waiver. And there's plenty of projects I do where we're doing like communities where the waiver works very successfully. And it's a lower threshold to have to get through.
Either way, the waiver would still go to the commission.
But yeah, no, it goes to the commission though.
Well, everything except a
But
re-roof.
the reason why
Would
it's a
go
lower.
So that's what I'm saying,
What-
now I'm working on a re-roof application, I'm thinking, how do I administer it?
Well, how
I
many,
can't.
how many Georgian style homes are there? Because I wouldn't say Bermuda necessarily lends itself to, there's no I don't think there's great historical precedent for Bermuda homes having a red roof. It was Georgian that specifically had it. And how many Georgian homes are there in Gulf Stream? You know,
Not that many, I don't think.
And
It's-
we're getting
it's
more
supposed to remain.
descriptions of
Yeah, we're getting
Georgia
more of those because they recognize that opens the door to more,
to getting away from a white tile,
yeah. Which,
a house by any other name, you know.
yeah,
thing I don't like about, I shouldn't say it that way, but I do know that when you go with this 13-inch, I'm gonna call it tongue and groove cement tile, 13-inch or the larger tile has this tongue and groove, you actually create a 45-degree angle. In the smaller tile, you have the horizontal and you have the vertical lines. When you introduce that tongue and groove, the larger tile, and they use that tongue and groove concept, you actually, if you stand on the side, you will see a third 45-degree line. But I know we can't control the size by our code, that's not gonna work either.
Well, I don't know, maybe you could.
Well, if it goes under the review process, you certainly can.
I am looking to approve a larger tile, tongue and groove, on a home that wants to do a total re-roof. But the only part of the home, in our opinion, and consultant opinion, that's Mediterranean style, Spanish Mediterranean, is the roof itself, that's it. So if you change it, then you change the style, which then allows for more variety of options. And that gives that 45-degree angle, but it's not a coastal Bermuda style home, so it's not applicable, that's bad. I know that didn't help.
I'm comfortable without specifically citing it in the code to allow the other colors. I'm comfortable with the overall process that, as a committee, we've kind of reached some processes that also allow things to happen. I know that it may not be easy, but at least the process is available
The
now.
architect has to prove the integrity of his design, basically, right?
There's a threshold that you have to prove that, yes, indeed, and you have to get a committee to agree, yes, you do have a Georgian home. It doesn't get up to staff to say, okay, it's a Georgian
And
home.
that dark, the language, other dark, makes that possible.
Right, and what, and protect Gulfstream all along is why I nonchalantly said red was dark. You do have this prohibition against primary colors, which red is.
I can just
Okay.
tell you, if you bring red into me on another home, I'm not gonna discourage you.
Okay, so the suggestion is that we do insert the language or other dark color tile into that same part that deals with gray slate and now deals with shakes and has the level 3 approval.
And where that'll help the committee as well is, because often what's coming in is we're coming in with like this dark black tile or dark gray tile.
Right, yeah.
And there's some that have some variations, striations on it in color that has been in the area slate-like, and then furthermore to the slate, like some of it has some modeling and
It's
surface.
getting very,
And the reality is that everyone, we're looking at them in this room versus out in the sun, where they change completely during the course of the day, how they appear.
it's getting hard, so I think that language makes
I'm comfortable
Okay.
adding it, it gives some more opportunity.
Consensus on that? Why don't you make a motion?
Make a motion to
Include
include the verbiage regarding dark colors,
other
other
dark colored tile.
dark
section 7238, subparagraph A,
Second.
after the.
Somebody writing it down.
Slate light.
That's it.
It's going quickly over here.
Okay, well,
All right, we've dealt with solar.
Speak-
we've dealt
okay.
with-
There was a
who
second.
made that motion?
Benjamin made the phone.
Yeah.
All right,
You made it.
Benjamin, would you do me a favor, pick up your microphone and get it close to your mouth and say it all over again.
But that was the
Serious.
easy one. Sweet dirt.
Make a motion that section 7238 roofs, subsection A, be amended to include in the description of color, other dark colored tiles.
Second.
That was perfect.
That was perfect, you see?
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, what about the language of prohibited? Did he say that, add, that we're gonna, that would be covered under the consistency concept of the attorneys in the codes?
Well, that doesn't even need to be in the motion of this committee, in my opinion, it's a request and a suggestion, it's not
Okay,
really,
okay.
we're not drafting the legalities, but,
Okay,
but we did have a motion on the metal.
okay,
Keep it prohibited.
okay. You know, okay.
No, we gotta make it a lot easier. You understand? We're,
You can try to do
we
that.
unanimously agreed that we are going to leave metal roofs in the prohibited categories.
Okay,
And we've added the shake, would we say cedar shakes is the way I describe it, as a roof material that may be considered in the level 3 process under this same section, 7238A. And we've added other dark color tile to that same section.
okay.
We have not addressed the issue of the hard surface shiny white tile, which was raised by one of the comments.
Well, that is,
That's in the first section, first part of that same reference subsection,
oh, okay, yeah.
where it says white through and through, smooth, uncoated
Yeah.
tile. And the suggestion has been made, this fellow wanted to put a coated, shiny, white. So it's not through and through, and it's not uncoated.
On that topic, Bermuda style homes and slurry roofs, is that something?
Like where somebody comes in and throws another layer of stuff on it, which historically is what they've done in the islands.
Exactly.
Where, I guess the differentiation is some can have a shiny characteristic to it and some don't. And I have no objection to putting a slurry coat on top so long as it doesn't have a shiny coat to it.
Ooh. Now, how do I control that one?
You can do a measurement of reflectivity on it.
I can?
Well.
We'll get you a little meter.
Which gets measured it. Yeah, I mean, that's a really key one, that like, the islands, where you could just ship in stuff really easily, but you could get a laborer to come and just slap on it.
This is a slippery slope, no pun intended.
Well, the other reason I brought it up is it is Bermuda style architecture, that's spring results you see when you're in review. And it's not in your, in your guidelines, so. Not that it has to be, I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay,
Okay, what Keith might be getting is, in the initial install of the roof, there's clear guidelines that you can't have a shiny glazed roof. Have residents of Gulfstream, if any of them applied for it, instead of replacing their roof, putting a coating on their white tile roof? And what has
I
happened?
am sure that's happened.
Mhm.
It's not permitted. I mean, there's no permit review on that.
Like if somebody's coming in, he wants to repaint their roof, they repaint it with that, wouldn't be required to come in for a permit.
Well, I have to get a permit, I don't have to get a permit, I have to get approval to paint my house.
Right?
If you're gonna,
If you're gonna change the color, if you want a
No,
white
I
house.
have to get a permit.
they have to come in for what we call a level 1 review. And declare, if you're gonna put it back the same color, then you just declare that, there's no charge for it or anything. But I'm sure that they do it in under the word of maintenance, which isn't a repainting. And we don't know it.
Because I don't have an objection to, as long as it's not shiny.
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't.
It can also at times be cost effective, if done right.
Hurry up, speak now.
Can we just?
Was this something that was?
No, there's a few things
was
though.
Is this something that was on the agenda even? or-
No, that's no, I mean, let's go,
No, we can move on now.
let's
Let's not.
have a
stir the
problem,
pot.
let's fix
stir
the
the
problem
pot.
someday in this
Thanks.
regard.
Let's not stir the pot up this one. But thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, right.
No, bring him up.
Do we want to move to,
We're gonna do that, but I'm afraid she's gonna yell at me. Go ahead.
Bill,
Are you on?
is ours or?
Part of it is,
My mic?
We have trouble hearing you on the tape.
Good as
That
hell.
may be why.
They figured it out. Darn it. But at least,
It was taken down
think
here.
how much of the meeting I got at one minute.
The higher up, the better.
Okay, the final thing is, Bill has taken a first cut at the real substantive part of a report that we might issue. I'm gonna ask you to add to it what we've done today, but just in the context of you did it before, just listing the items and so forth. What I would like to do is, number one, get your suggestions, but I think it's very important that, and I'm prepared to do this, that I will write what you might call an introduction. I think it's very important, because if one looks at this, they're gonna say, geez, they've been having all these meetings, and this doesn't look like very much. I think it's important that everybody understands the steps we took at the beginning to solicit comments, and, the nature of the comments we received and the number of them we received, which was, as I recall, something less than 10. Just lay the groundwork of why we did not feel a total review of the design code was really an appropriate way to go. I think we also we spent a tremendous amount of time on issues which we decided not to do anything about. So I think we ought to list those items that we discussed that we did not come forth with a recommendation. And so I would propose to handle that part as well, since I'm gonna be going through the minutes again and so forth. And then I'd like to circulate that draft, which I suppose has to be, we do that by email, can we do that?
It's going to be public record eventually anyway, so.
I have there's no objection.
Yeah, we can,
other than the
we
fact
will
that it's a draft.
circulate it by email to those who want it, which we've kind of got it boiled down to 3, and then the hard copy available to 2.
Yeah.
Available at the pickup at Town Hall.
But my point is, we're gonna have to have another meeting to approve it. I mean, this is the kind of thing we could normally, in another setting, circulate, get comments, recirculate, and get approvals, over email.
Actually, would it not be possible for this board to put that final document in the review and approval of the chairman? So that you don't have another
I think I'd rather have another meeting.
meeting? Okay.
I mean, if we can, what I'd like to do is have a meeting next week, and it shouldn't take more than 30 minutes to just approve.
Final product.
Yeah. But my question is, I mean, can I circulate it for comments in the interim? Because if I can, then it makes it real easy when we have a meeting.
No, I don't think you can do that. Help me out here, Rita, it seems like a violation of the Sunshine Law. He's asking, he's asking for input. I'm not so sure he can send it out for information, but the responses back create a conflict. Pretty sure.
Well, I
What
guess
if you,
we'll wrestle with that.
I was thinking that maybe it needs to come through our office.
That's a great idea. There's no reason why we can't send out a series of agendas with it attached, right? So we're gonna set a date for a meeting, and so then hopefully Monday we can send something out with a draft. But you're saying they can't comment back?
No, I just know dealing with commissioners, I can inform them of
That's what I meant.
information. I can't take and query them for input. That has to be done in a public setting.
Okay, so
That is definitely the Sunshine Law.
if we find out that for some reason we can circulate it before the meeting in draft, so we can massage it before we get together and do it. we
Individually, you
certainly
can
will.
massage it, just don't communicate it back.
Right, so that we can review it and come to the meeting with
Well,
comment.
you'll definitely get a copy of it,
Oh,
Yeah,
so that
no,
when we
no
come to the
question.
meeting with comment, we can have our own
Yeah.
comments.
Individual copies,
right.
that's right.
but I'm
Very
just
good.
trying to make that process easier, but it looks like we aren't gonna be able to. So, Thursday morning,
We've got a commission meeting on Friday, but
Long commission meeting on Friday, right?
Thursday the 8th.
Thursday, we don't have anything going on in this room. I don't know how you guys schedule this.
8 o'clock Thursday morning.
I'm,
is that right?
I'm free.
That's me, 8.
Fine.
Yeah,
I hope this won't take more than 30 minutes.
So then we start at 8:30.
It's 8 o'clock.
We're not gonna do that for you, or no. Okay, Thursday morning,
right. 8 AM.
8 AM.
Thank you.
You guys have been great.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
You can go online.
It's great.
You know,
So, motion for adjournment,
yes.
second?
Oh,
I can't do that.
Second.
Did you want to discuss something else before?
I heard Ben said,
I do, but I'm gonna
all in
handle it
favor?
a different way. I just wanna
Aye.
inform you that.